You know, you're born in Serial, you grew up in Chinook, and eventually settled in Olds, Alberta. But where did that love of motorcycles start?
Well, I was just coming out of grade 12 in June of 1946, and at that time gasoline was selling them for about 35 cents a gallon for 4.5 liters, and for young guys that were making maybe 35, 50 cents an hour, it was fairly expensive. And I heard about a motorcycle that was sitting in a garage up at Bowden, and I checked it out, and it was a 26 Harley JD 74. It didn't run. I bought it for $25, hauled it home on my dad's farm truck, and went to Calgary and bought a battery for it, and I was going to get it running. And I thought I had a job with the garage in Olds to start working coming out of school, and I stopped in the day before at the end of school and find out when I could start. And he said, "Oh, business has been kind of slow. He couldn't hire me." So I was disappointed. Went to the post office and got the mail, and in the mail was a postcard. They wanted the harvest excursion to Ontario. If you would go down there and work on a farm for 6 weeks, you had a free train trip to Ontario, and if you worked your 6 weeks, you could come back for $5. If you didn't work your 6 weeks, you were on your own. Anyway, 3 days later, I was on the train for Ontario, and while I was away, Rex, who was younger than me, he got it running. My dad never had anything to do with motorcycles, but my dad had more tools than most farm people had, and we learned a lot about mechanics generally from my dad. He got it running, and it hardly didn't really get to use it, and it broke down. Those JDs had in the timing gears. A screw came out in the case and got in the timing gears and wrecked the timing gears, and that stopped the engine. And meantime, I finished my 6 weeks down east and came back, and we ordered a brand new Panther 350 mail order from Nicholson Brothers in Saskatoon, whom a lot of you people are familiar with. And it arrived on the 19th of December, 1946. The weather was good, and we got our first rides in right then. And it evolved. It evolved from there. We got the bike together, the two of us. Figured, well, one can use the bike and the other can use the family car, which was the 29 Model A Ford. However, it seemed like we both always wanted the bike, so I sold out to him and bought a 39 Ariel 600 side valve from Walt Healy. So we each had a bike, and it evolved from there. That's how we got started.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you probably did have a close association with the Nicholson brothers. It sounded like maybe you did get into the war surplus motors and motorcycles, maybe as they came across your path over those early years as well.
Well, the way it worked out, being as we were kind of handy and had a few tools, and the neighbor friends came over with their bikes, and we'd help them fix, and it kind of evolved from there. And actually, Rex went to 1 year school in Calgary, and he worked for English motorcycle sales, so he got a little experience there, and it evolved from that. It's strange how some things just evolve.
True enough, true enough. I'll maybe ask one more question, and then I will turn the mic over for questions from the floor. Maybe if you could speak a little bit to the how the Honda dealership, I guess, came about. Certainly, after the war and these Japanese upstarts that were there. What kind of what was that reception like, and what did it take to actually really get a dealership into Canada, even before American Honda, I believe, I think by 1 year. But again, probably working with people like Trev Dealey, I guess, and some of those guys. But tell us about those years.
Well, actually, Trev Dealey was the original importer of Honda in North America in, gotta stop thinking now.
1958.
Honda shipped him over a 250 Dream to try out as a demonstration, to tell him what they were going to build and so on. And one of my rides out to Vancouver, I actually had a ride on that bike. But I thought, oh, well, Japan, that's where the cheap toys come, which is more junk than anything. And I never thought much about it. And then the next spring, we had Trevor had a meeting in Calgary for the English motorcycle dealers that he was distributing BSA and Ariel and so on, and showed us all the new models, etc., etc. And when the meeting was all over, he said, "I got something in another room to show you." And he took us over, and here you had some Hondas, some Honda 50s and a Honda Dream and so on. And apparently I was kind of negative on the whole thing. That's all I knew about was Japanese junk toys. And anyway, he showed to the dealers, and none of the dealers were really that interested. And Trevor was pretty disappointed. He didn't get a very good reception, but the machines were there. So Bob Kane Sr. in Calgary and the Green family in Edmonton, he said, well, just take these machines and he give them to him on consignment and put them on the floor and see what people think of them. And he was heading, he had driven up from Vancouver, and he spent about 3 days going back because he didn't know how he was going to face his family telling him that he couldn't sell the bikes. And when he finally got back into the shop, the guy said, "Hey, they're on the phone. They want more of them. They're sold out." People saw them, bought them, and that's how it evolved. And we never took it on until August of '59. And the big thing was our 14-year-old Honda's 50 Cubs and so on, which they've sold millions of over the years. And that was the start of the Honda. We were all selling British bikes before that, which we continue to do because Honda didn't have a big one then.
Yeah, speaking of bigger bikes, does anybody know the significance of this bike on our t-shirt? Anybody?
It's a black bomber.
This is a black bomber. And the association with Glenn?
His favorite bike. His first.
Not quite, but it was his first Honda.
There you go.
So selling Honda since '59, and then he bought this 450 in 1966. And then went. Did you go with Rex down to Key West, Florida, on that, or did you go alone, or?
No, a friend of mine who bought a BMW from us when we were selling BMWs, and we trucked down to St. George, Utah, left the truck, and we rode down to Key West and back. And the 450 was the biggest before the 450s was the 305, and I was still riding the Triumphs and BSAs back then. And But when we got when that 450 came, it would outrun the 650s. And it would last longer doing it.
Okay, do we have any questions
I got one.
out there? Skinny's has a question.
How was the price comparison between the new Hondas you're selling and the British bikes? Like, were they quite a bit cheaper than the British bikes?
You know, I don't just remember how the pricing was. I think it was probably fairly similar with the 450s.
Okay.
And the 650s were probably not that much difference. It wasn't price, it was performance. And I put 45,000 miles on that 450. I put a set of rings in it at 27,000, and it only had 6,000 wear on the cylinders at 45,000. And we never got that kind of mileage out of our British bikes back then.
There you go. Wow.
Come on up, guys, if you're, and girls, if you've got questions, now's the time. Great. Rick Best?
What was the very, very first Honda you sold?
It would have been a 50 Cub.
What model? What model?
C100,
Little Cub?
the Cub, yeah.
Super Cub.
Yeah.
You talked about finishing high school and riding your first motorcycle. How old were you, and when and why did you decide to open a motorcycle shop?
Okay, I was 18. I got my driver's license on my 16th birthday, back in the day when you to get your license at 16, you had to have your father's signature and $1, and that's how. So I went and got my driver's license on my 16th birthday and started driving a car legally. And you know, in 1944, there wasn't a lot of driving back then, and we were 10 miles out of Olds. So it was mostly in there, although I did sneak into town a couple of times without my dad knowing about it. Anyway, that's how that started, yeah.
How about the dealership part of things?
Well, the dealership, it started out with us helping guys fix their bikes and so on. And there was English Motorcycle Sales in Calgary. Dennis Cole was the owner. He was from England and was a veteran of the Second War. And he opened a shop in Calgary. And he had Norton's, and he set us up as a sub-dealer. And a friend of mine and I got Norton ES2 500 singles from him, and that's, and we were doing some repair work too, and he was giving us a bit of a discount on parts and so on, but it didn't take us long to find out that we could buy them directly, not from him. And so we bought them from distributors after that, Dealey's, and then before Nicholson's actually as a dealer.
Ari's got a question.
How much bikes have you sold?
Oh, man.
Thousands.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah, that's a good question.
That is a good question. I remember was it Churchill that was behind in the back alley there?
Churchill Garage, yeah.
And I remember going back in there years ago and picking, looking for parts and stuff, and lots of sales receipts and so on in there. And I happened to find one from Glenn Sather. Glenn Sather bought a motorcycle from Turple Brothers. Can't remember the year, back in the 70s somewhere. 71 maybe? A Husky, okay, yeah. And I think his address was in Banff. He was living in Banff, Alberta. Any more questions from the youngsters? Oh, we got lots of questions here. Come on up or yell it out.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your racing history?
I don't have a racing history. My brother was the athlete, and he was the racer. I was the tourist.
Albert, you had a question.
Back in around 92, I was rebuilding an NSU quickly, and it was the first time I met you. I went down to your place, and you were still in downtown Red Deer at the time, and you took me across the alley to a rooming house and into the basement. And into the basement of this rooming house, all along one wall was NSU Quickly parts, which really amazed me that you had so many NSU parts. So my question kind of follows the question of this lady over here. It's how many different manufacturers do you have a dealership for?
Yeah, there it is right there.
Oh, there it is. Oh, jeez. Okay.
Put your shirt on, Al.
Put the shirt on, thank you.
Yeah, and someone else pointed out that, well, there's no CVMG on your shirt. And, it just kind of didn't work this year. It just seemed like by the time we put all those marks on the back that Turple Brothers have sold over the years, and the fact that he's 2 million kilometers and still going, we just looked a little too busy, and so something had to go, and that's what gave. Yes.
Bill, can Glenn remember who he sold the first 50 up to? Can you remember that?
Glenn, do you remember who you sold the first 50 Cub to?
I think one of the two first ones was Ken White. His father was a dentist in Red Deer. And Nelson Brinson was one of the early buyers of them. In 1949, NSU was the largest manufacturer of motorbikes in the world. But mainly, they had big singles, 650 and so on, but it was very, very much into the mopeds. And the 14-year-old law was in effect, and boy, the young people sure bought them. And that was how they did.
Okay. Jeff?
At one time you told me that you had been, of course, visited the BSA factory. I don't know if you've talked about it yet or not tonight, but I'm kind of interested in the story.
Yeah, the question is about concerning the BSA factory over in England, and I guess your experience in that trip.
Well, that was 1973, and that was our biggest year selling Triumphs. We sold 50 that year, which was a lot in those days. And Trevor Daly there's about 6 of us dealers, took us over to England in 1973 so we could see the BSA and Triumph factories. And I've got a couple of stories about that part. 72 was the last year that BSA produced machines, but they were still building parts for the triples, so they were building the engines for the Triumph Tridents. And so anyway, they took us over to the BSA factory, and the fellow said, took us through one building and went through there, and he said, "No, I'll take you over to the new building." And so we went over to another building, and he said, "When they built this building in 1918, they call it the new building, and they still call it the new building." I'm trying to just remember, there was something else that we did. Well, maybe it'll come to me before we're done.
Good. I guess speaking of trips, what about the trip to Japan? Yeah, I'm sure there's a story or two there.
Well, by coincidence, the trip to England was first, and the trip to Japan followed that in the same fall. So I was away quite a bit, and there was a number of dealers. There was about 25 of us dealers. We actually got to meet Mr. Honda himself. I have a picture of him with our group in my office at the store, and that was a big deal going to Japan at that time. They really showed us a good time.
What about the solo trip to the Harley factory?
Yeah, there's a little bit more recent history. The solo trip down to Milwaukee. I guess that would have been their 100th anniversary, in 2003.
I didn't go for their anniversary, but a few years ago I did make a trip down to Milwaukee so I could visit the Harley Museum.
Oh.
And they've got a tremendous museum there, machines right back to day one. And anyway, one of the fellows who was working for Honda had worked for Harley, and so he said to ask for so-and-so, and maybe they'd show me a little more than they normally do. So when I went in there, it's in the downtown area of the museum, and they have a gate there, and the motorcycles can park behind the gate. So I parked my Can-Am in with the rest of the Harleys and a couple of Indians that were sitting there, and went in and wanted to talk to somebody about the fellow that worked there, and nobody seemed to know him, and I guess he didn't make contact. So anyway, they have a lunch place in the building just across on the other side of the parking lot. So I did some going through the museum, saw quite a bit of it, but not all of it. So I went over to get some lunch, and the lady showed me the table. I said to her that I had ridden down from Alberta, and I said, "How many 90-year-olds do you get riding down here to see the museum?" And she got really interested and very, very, very helpful. And she said, "I think Bill would like to meet you." So she sat me down there, and a little while later, she came over and introduced me to Bill Davidson. And he sat down and had a visit with me and talked about mutual friends and so on. And he had an office upstairs. His position, he was dealing with dealerships from other countries. And so, we had some mutual acquaintances, and like the Dealys and the Canes and so on. Anyway, so when he wanted to leave, I asked him, and I told him what I was riding, and I gave him a business card and asked him if he had a business card with him. He didn't, but he said, "I'll come down and bring you one." So anyway, about the time I was finishing lunch, Johnny came and sat down again and gave me a card and gave me a little booklet. It's a Harley booklet that you can write your trips in on and so on. And so we had a visit a little longer, and when I went out to leave, to pay for the meal, he even had bought me lunch. So I had a nice visit with him, and very personable guy.
Yeah, no, great story. And I think, I mean, this time period, I think you were in pushing the fall a little bit. Didn't you run into some snow along that trip, along that way?
Yeah, from Minot, North Dakota, going up into Saskatchewan, it was snowing pretty good. The biggest problem with the windshield is that it doesn't clear, and I was leaning off to one side to look around the side of the windshield. Anyway, I made it.
Glenn's still up for some more questions, so what time do we have, Glenn? Are we doing that time? Good.
Before the street lights come on.
We have a question from Hannah.
Glenn, I was sitting in your office with you one day, and speaking of snow, you said that you had some pictures to show me, and you showed me pictures of you and Rex coming back from Edmonton at Christmas time. You were going back to the farm in Olds, I believe, and snow, and they're on bikes, middle of Christmas. Did that happen often?
Quite often.
Yeah, and that road wouldn't have been paved, I wouldn't imagine. Yeah, talking to people like Lou Widener, some of these guys that, would run bikes in just about any weather. And that was, like you say, you speak a little bit to the cost of fuel and, you know, why that interest in motorcycles started. That certainly would be part of it, yes.
Well, one of the other things was that I'm losing my train of thought here.
It'll come back to you, yeah. We all have that.
What's the furthest round trip you ever made?
Furthest round trip.
Well, the furthest trip, I guess, was in two stages. In middle of September of 1982, my wife and I left and headed down across Canada and went to New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, up to Corner Brook, Newfoundland, and then down to Florida and visited relatives in different places. And then we left the bike there and flew home. Well, we flew to a dealer meeting in Toronto, and we flew home from there. And in the wintertime, I bought an old motorhome, and a 20-foot motorhome and a trailer, and we drove down and to Arizona, then flew over to Florida, picked up the bike, and rode back across. And we did hit some cold weather in the Texas area, but we had friends that were down in Arizona that met us in Texas and rode back with us to Arizona from there.
Wow.
And what bike was that?
Let's see. Oh, 82 Aspen Cape.
Fine choice.
Yeah,
Let's get
absolutely.
question back over here. Yes.
Glenn, in your opinion, of all the Hondas, what would you consider the best of all the Hondas over the period? Considering price, reliability, and performance, what would be your pick as the Honda?
All of them.
Well, there's been so many models, and they get better and better. But the 450 was such a pleasure, and it went, you could run it really fast. One time I rode from Red Deer to Edmonton in an hour and 5 minutes. Fortunately, I never got caught. But it would go. But it wasn't as smooth. It had a bit vibration from 5,500 to 6,500 RPM. But it would just level right out at 7,000. It was smooth at 77 mile an hour. That thing would go. And that was a big deal. And then, of course, getting the 750, and it was so smooth and so quiet and so on. And I put 100,000 miles on that one in 6 years.
Yeah, that's the 69 Sandcast that's racked up that many miles. I mean, put it to good use, exactly.
It's got 111,000 on it now.
111,000, yeah. Great. There was a question back here somewhere. Larry?
Do you have any idea how many motorcycles you have sold over the years?
I think his answer is a lot. We'll get the answer here.
Well, that's something I really haven't tallied up over the years. One thing the motorcycle clubs have done, and from day one, it was how many miles did you ride last year? And as a result, I've got pretty good records of how many miles I did year after year after year. And in January, I figured I hit the 2 million kilometer mark. I hit the 1 million mile mark in 2013. And I'm still counting, but I'm just putting miles on for good measure now, for the pleasure of riding.
Okay, well, I don't want to cut anyone off if they've got questions. Just as a reminder, like Glenn's going to be off tomorrow, but he will be hopefully back for breakfast on Sunday morning. When do you want it? Yeah, I think we're like 9. Yeah, I think like 9 to 10:30. That'll work. I think we'll, yeah. Bob is actually going to do the flip-in for us again this year, so he'll hang out and we'll eat as long as there's food there.
Sometime after 9 o'clock.
Good. I've got a couple things for Glenn. As you know, I mean, certainly any CVMG member would know, we have Glenn as an honorary life member into the CVMG. That occurred in Saskatoon in June of this year. A little late. I know we tried about 10 or 15 years ago and it didn't quite happen, but was glad to see that it happened this time. I got a call from Earl Dreeshen. He's Glenn's MP for Red Deer Mountain View. And Glenn, I'd like to present this honorarium for you to hang on the wall or show off as you wish. But that was from Earl. Earl thought he would maybe try and get here, but obviously probably pretty busy. So congratulations on that. And again, I was thinking, well, what does Central Alberta section give Glenn? Surely he doesn't need another plaque to hang on the wall. So we're presenting you with the $200 gas card because we know he'll use it. And like you say, you're putting on miles for good measure. So use that, burn that up for sure.
Sure use gas.
Good, thank you all. Like I say, cards are up here, posters to sign, and Glenn will be back for breakfast on Sunday. So, again, on behalf of everyone here, we wish you a happy birthday, and many more to come. Keep riding. Yeah.